Most people think average looks harmless. It does not. It looks responsible. It looks reasonable. It wakes up early, replies fast, says yes too quickly, and slowly turns a life into a routine so polished nobody notices it is a cage. That was me at 32. I lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Columbus, Ohio. I worked as a project coordinator for a logistics company that moved freight, blame, and urgency in equal amounts. I paid bills on time, wore plain shirts, kept a clean kitchen, and called it maturity. I was not unhappy enough to leave. I was not brave enough to admit safety had made me dull. Everyone around me had a word for who I was. My manager, Brent, called me solid. My girlfriend, Lena, called me easy. My mother called me good. Those words sounded flattering until I learned what they really meant. Solid meant available. Easy meant pliable. Good meant obedient. They were not compliments. They were job descriptions. Every day ran on the same script. Brent would drop extra work on my desk because he knew I would handle it without drama. Co-workers would forget details because I cleaned the mess quietly. Family members would volunteer my weekends before asking because I never pushed back hard enough to make memory stick. I told myself I was dependable. The truth was uglier. I was predictable. And predictable people are the easiest people to use. The crack appeared on a Thursday in March. Brent walked into the conference room after lunch, smiled, and announced that our team would spend the next 2 weekends helping the regional director prepare for a software rollout. He did not ask first. He said, "You guys don't mind stepping up, right?" 3 people nodded. I nodded too. My mouth moved before my mind had even arrived. That night, Lena reminded me we were supposed to drive to Cincinnati for her cousin's engagement dinner. When I told her what happened, she stared at me and said, "You know they use you because you make it easy, right?" I got defensive immediately. I said she did not understand how work operated. I said this was temporary. I said proving yourself mattered. She did not argue. She just looked tired and said, "Daniel, temporary has become your personality." That sentence followed me into the next day like smoke. Temporary has become your personality. I tried to bury it under spreadsheets and emails, but Brent sent me another message before noon, asking me to cover a client presentation for a coworker who had a lot going on. I typed yes before I finished reading it. 10 minutes later, I was in the restroom staring at my reflection, with my phone still in my hand, feeling something I had not felt in years. Disgust. Not at Brent, at myself. That evening I took a different route and stopped at a used bookstore I had not visited since college. The place smelled like old paper and rain. An older man behind the counter was shelving books with a kind of stillness that made the room feel watched. I wandered without purpose until a dark green hardback slid off a crowded shelf and hit the floor near my shoes. The title was The Prince. "Take it," the old man said. I looked up. "I didn't say I wanted it. You picked it up and kept holding it," he said. "That usually means something. Besides, most men only reach for Machiavelli when politeness stops working." I should have laughed. Instead, I asked, "Do I look that obvious?" He smiled without kindness. "You look exhausted from performing a version of yourself other people find convenient." That sentence hit harder than it should have. He introduced himself as Elias, former history teacher, current owner, full-time observer of human weakness. He asked one question. "When was the last time you made a choice that surprised the people around you?" I had no answer. Not a real one. He nodded, like silence had confirmed his theory. "That is average," he said. "Not lack of talent. Lack of disruption. People know who you are before you enter the room. That means they know how to move you." I bought the book. He refused to give me a bag. "Carry it openly," he said. "Not because the book matters, because discomfort does." I read that night until 2 in the morning. What unsettled me was not the famous lines. It was the feeling beneath them. The world did not reward goodness. It rewarded structure, timing, restraint, and understanding motives before others understood yours. Worst of all, it showed me something brutal about myself. Nobody needed to control me by force. They only needed to predict me. The next Saturday, instead of going to the office, I turned off my phone at 7 in the morning and drove west until the city disappeared. I parked at a rest stop under a flat grey sky and waited. Panic arrived right on time. Brent would be furious. Lena would think I was spiraling. My mother would say something worried and passive. Every fear rose in the exact order it always did. That was when I understood what Elias meant. I was not reacting freely. I was following a script so old it felt like instinct. At noon, I turned my phone back on. 23 notifications. Brent had written, "Where are you?" followed by, "Call me now." Lena had sent one text, "Are you okay?" My mother had left a voicemail asking if anything irrational was happening. I looked at the screen, felt the old reflex rise, and did something violent. I answered nobody. I sent Brent one message. "I'm unavailable this weekend." I should have been consulted before being committed. Then I put the phone face down on the passenger seat and listened to my heart hammer against my ribs. If this feels familiar, keep listening. That message did not improve my life. It detonated it. Monday morning smelled like burnt coffee. Brent was waiting outside my cubicle before I set my bag down. He did not yell. Men like him save anger for people they fear. With me, he used disappointment dressed as professionalism. He said I had put him in a difficult position. He said leadership noticed. Then he delivered the sentence that had controlled me for years. "That's not like you." I almost apologized. The reflex rose that fast. Then Elias's question flashed through my head. "When was the last time you made a choice that surprised the people around you?" "Maybe that's the problem," I said. Brent's face changed for half a second. Not anger, uncertainty. Then he asked whether something personal was going on. I told him it was not personal. Future commitments involving my time needed discussion before they were announced. He stared at me, said we would revisit expectations later, and walked away. The room did not reset. Co-workers looked up, then away. By lunch, 2 people had stopped by my desk. That happens when you break a role. People care less whether the old version of you is still available. That night, Lena brought Thai food and no sympathy performance. When I told her what happened, she smiled. "So you finally said no," I said, consulted. "That's worse for Brent," she said. "No sounds emotional. Consulted sounds structural." She was right. A clean boundary can be ignored. A new frame cannot. If I had said I was overwhelmed, Brent could have filed me under fragile. If I had apologized, he could have restored order. But I had changed the terms. He was no longer the automatic owner of my time. That frightened me more than relieved me. The next evening I returned to the bookstore. Elias was repairing the spine of an old atlas with thin, careful hands. I told him about Brent and expected approval. He gave me none. "You think one refusal rewrites identity?" he asked. "No." "Good. Your problem is bigger than saying yes too often. Everyone knows what role you will play before they speak. Until that changes, you will keep living inside other people's forecasts." He walked me to a shelf and named 3 prisons that kept average people average. "Script, role, attachment," he said. "First, you repeat a story about who you are. Then you perform what others expect. Then you cling emotionally to approval, outcomes, and being understood. Most people never notice the bars because the cage is lined with praise." I asked how to break all 3. "Interrupt pattern," he said, quietly, repeatedly, without explanation. His first assignment sounded small. For 1 week, I had to stop explaining unnecessarily. No long texts, no emotional footnotes, no paragraphs proving I was good. If I declined something, I had to do it cleanly. You explain because you want to be seen as reasonable, Elias said. Reasonable is often just another word for accessible. The experiment exposed me. My mother called Wednesday and asked if I was coming over Sunday to help my uncle clear out his garage. In the old pattern, that was not a request. It was duty wrapped in assumption. I said, "I'm not available Sunday." Silence. Then the old pressure point arrived. Why not? My mouth filled with excuses. Work, rest, plans. Instead I said, "I already decided." She cycled through, offended, wounded, and confused in under 10 seconds. "You're being distant lately." After we hung up, I sat in the dark kitchen and realized how much of my life had been spent making other people comfortable with my decisions. Not making the right one. Making it comfortable for witnesses. Thursday brought the next fracture. During a rollout review, one of our analysts made an avoidable timeline error. I had privately fixed versions of that mistake for months. This time I stayed silent. Brent turned toward me, expecting rescue. "Daniel, anything to add?" "Yes," I said. "Ownership works better when it stays with the owner." The analyst straightened and corrected the issue herself. Small moment. Huge consequence. Brent's eyes hardened because I had stepped out of function. Average people are most useful when they keep solving problems. Nobody assigned to them, but everybody benefits from. Friday night, Lena asked whether I was happy. Hard question. "No," I said, "but for the first time in years, I'm not numb either." She leaned against my kitchen counter and studied me. "That's probably the beginning." "Of what?" "Of becoming someone people can't casually use." I did, but something in me still reached for the old life. Predictability, praise, the relief of being understood. Elias had warned me about that too. "The old self does not leave dramatically," he said. "It leaves like addiction and asks for one more exception." The exception came Tuesday. Lena came to my apartment carrying 2 coffees and a face she was trying to keep neutral. She had been offered a marketing position in Chicago. Better salary, sharper team, real movement. She explained the role, the timeline, the relocation package, then looked straight at me and said, "I want you to come with me." There it was. Attachment in human form. Not philosophy, not theory. A real person I loved, and a real fork in the road. The old me would have decided instantly, what do I need to do to keep this? Instead, I asked for a day. Disappointment crossed her face before she could hide it. "If you need that long," she said, "I think I already have my answer." That night, every pressure point lit up at once. Lose her and prove you are impossible to build with. Go with her, and maybe you finally escape the life that is shrinking you. Stay and admit comfort owns you. Leave and let your family call you reckless. By morning, I knew one thing. Whatever I chose, fear was not allowed to choose it. I went to the bookstore before answering. Elias listened without interrupting. Then he asked the question I was beginning to hate and need in equal measure. "What serves you now?" "This isn't a framework," I said. "It's my life." "That is why the framework matters," he said. I sat there angry, because he was right. I was not choosing between love and ambition. I was being asked whether attachment would choose for me. If losing Lena pushed me into instant compliance, I was not choosing. I was obeying fear. "So what do? I asked. "Feel nothing? Feel fully? Depend less." That distinction was harder than any rule he had given me. When Lena came back that evening, I told her the truth. "I'm not saying yes because I'm afraid to lose you," I said. "I'm saying yes because I don't respect the life I'm defending here." She looked shocked, then relieved. "That's the most honest thing you've said in months." I gave notice. Brent invited me into his office and closed the door halfway, the way people do when they want intimacy without accountability. He asked whether Chicago was smart, whether I had considered the cost, whether I was acting emotionally. Soft questions, all designed to pull me back into self-doubt while sounding concerned. The old me would have explained and softened. Instead, I thanked him for the opportunities, said the decision was final, and stood up before the conversation could become a negotiation. "You're making a mistake," he said, with the certainty of a man who mistakes comfort for truth. "Maybe," I said, "but it'll be mine." Chicago was not glamorous. Our apartment was smaller, louder, and more expensive than fantasy had promised. My new job at a supply chain software firm was better, not magical. Nobody congratulated me. Nobody cared. That helped. Public transformation turns into theater. Private reconstruction leaves less room to lie. For the first 2 months, I spoke little and watched. My new manager, Simone, did not reward eagerness. She rewarded clarity. She let silence sit in meetings until people over-explained themselves. I noticed the pattern quickly. The loudest people exposed the most. Preferences, insecurities, agendas. The quiet people collected data. Elias had been right. Silence was leverage. Then I forgot that. A coworker named Ryan asked what projects I wanted long-term. I liked him. He seemed sharp. So I told him more than I should have. I mentioned a process redesign idea I had been building privately, something that could reduce escalations and shorten onboarding delays. He looked impressed, asked smart questions, said I should pitch it soon. 2 weeks later, Ryan presented a strikingly similar framework in a leadership meeting. Not word for word, better, cleaner, different enough to protect himself. I sat there feeling the temperature leave my hands while he walked executives through the skeleton of something I had spoken too early. He never looked at me once. After the meeting, I stood in the restroom staring at the stall door, furious in the old emotional way. I wanted to confront him immediately, expose him, explain everything, but a better question cut through the heat. What system created this? The answer came fast. I had broadcast intention before establishing position. I had mistaken rapport for trust. I had exposed work too early. The problem was me. That night, I called Elias. He was not surprised. "Good," he said. "Good? You just paid tuition for a lesson you would have ignored if it stayed theoretical." I wanted sympathy. He gave me structure. "Do not chase the theft emotionally," he said. "Build a version too complete to steal halfway, and do it where no one can watch you becoming capable." So I did. For the next 3 months, I came home, ate quickly, and worked in silence at the small desk facing our brick wall. I mapped workflow failures, measured response times, tracked avoidable escalations, and built a model no one knew existed. Lena would come in after late campaigns and find me surrounded by sticky notes and printed reports. Sometimes she asked what I was building. I said, "Something I want finished before it's visible." She smiled the first few times. Then she stopped asking. That helped. Attention can deform a thing before it hardens. Winter arrived hard and metallic. I trained before dawn, kept my circles small, ignored invitations that smelled like networking theater, and stopped explaining absences. Something subtle changed at work. People started treating me with more caution, not because I had become louder, but because I had become harder to place. I no longer rushed to speak or filled pauses. I no longer volunteered my inner weather. On Thursday afternoon, Simone stopped by my desk and said, "Walk with me." Her tone gave nothing away. She closed the conference room door, placed a thin folder on the table, and said, "I've been watching your patterns." Months earlier, that sentence would have felt threatening. Now it felt like weather. "You stopped trying to be seen," she said. "That makes people underestimate you, which is useful until it becomes hiding for its own sake." She slid the folder toward me. Inside were service desk reports, escalations, response failures, onboarding delays, duplicated labor. In the margins, someone had highlighted the exact weaknesses I had been modeling. "I want a recommendation by Monday," she said. "Not a brainstorm, a system." For 1 second I thought about Ryan. about theft, about exposure. Simone must have seen something in my face because she added, "If you have work already, bring the work. If you're hiding because someone once took credit, you're still letting the same event control you." That landed cleanly. Detachment is not withdrawal. Control is not fear wearing better clothes. That was enough. I gave her the model on Monday, and by Thursday, I was standing in a room that would prove whether my old life had actually ended or whether I had only changed locations. The presentation room held 6 people, none of them generous. Vice presidents are rarely impressed by effort. They care about leverage, efficiency, and whether your idea survives pressure. Good, so did I now. I kept the language spare. No inflated vision, no personal branding, no performance. I showed them where money was leaking, why teams were trapped in reaction, and how a different system could reduce preventable chaos within 90 days. One executive asked whether the model had been pressure tested. I said yes. Another asked who helped build it. I said, "It was developed independently." Then Ryan spoke. He framed it as support, which is how opportunists often approach the knife. He said he had been part of some early conversations around similar ideas and wanted to make sure expectations stayed realistic. Elegant move. If I attacked him, I would look emotional. If I agreed, he would place his fingerprints on the work. The room turned toward me, waiting. The old version of me would have explained history, listed details, tried to win fairness in public. But unreadable people do not bleed where others expect. I looked at Ryan, then back at the vice president. Realistic expectations are exactly why this model is built on measurable bottlenecks, not opinions, I said. If there are questions about authorship, I can provide draft history and timestamps after this meeting. But the stronger question is whether the structure works. Silence. Then the vice president nodded once and said, "Correct. Continue." That was the moment. Small from the outside, massive underneath. I had protected substance, declined bait, and moved the frame back to reality. Ryan never interrupted again. By Friday afternoon, Simone told me the model was approved for pilot. Monday, she made me lead implementation. I should say, victory felt cinematic. It did not. It felt quiet, heavy, controlled, no rush. Just a deep certainty that the world had started responding to me differently because I had stopped handing it a usable script. But power changes your environment faster than it changes your private fears. 3 days after the approval, my mother called and left a voicemail saying my uncle had been asking about me and that I had become hard to reach in a way that doesn't feel like you. I listened twice. The words were ordinary. The mechanism was not. Reachable, like you. Family often resists your growth by describing your old compliance as your true self. I saved the message and did nothing. Lena noticed the change before I named it. One night while we washed dishes, she said, "You don't explain yourself anymore. Not cold, just finished." I looked at soap sliding down a plate and thought about who I had been a year earlier. "I think I used explanation as insurance," I said. "If everyone understood me, maybe they'd treat me fairly. And now? Now I think clarity matters more than understanding." She dried her hands and leaned against the counter. "That sounds expensive." "It is, because every real shift costs something." I had more control now, but less instant approval. More respect, but less easy warmth. Some co-workers treated me with caution, some with distance. Even Lena, who loved the stronger version of me, sometimes missed the softer one she could easily read. That is the hidden tax nobody discusses. When you stop being manageable, some people experience your boundaries as loss. Then came a test that mattered more than any office win. My father, absent in all the convenient ways for most of my life, emailed me after 14 months of silence. No apology, no history. Just a short note saying he would be in Chicago for business and wanted dinner if that still made sense. For 10 minutes I became 12 years old again. Hope is one of the oldest attachments, more manipulative than fear, because it disguises itself as healing. I almost said yes immediately. Then I paused and read the message again like a system, not a son. He had not asked how I was, had not named the gap, had not acknowledged the weight of showing up only when it suited him. He was opening contact on terms that protected his comfort. The old version of me would have accepted those terms just to keep the door alive. People often call that grace. Sometimes it is self-abandonment with spiritual branding. I wrote back the next morning, "I'm open to meeting after we speak honestly about why contact has been inconsistent. If that doesn't work for you, I understand." He never replied. It hurt more than I let anyone see, but hurt is not always a sign you chose wrong. Sometimes it is the pain of an illusion losing oxygen. The pilot launched 2 weeks later. The first month cut escalations by 18%. By the second month, other departments were asking about adoption. Ryan transferred teams. Brent emailed from Ohio once, pretending warmth, asking whether I might have time to chat career trajectory. I smiled at that and archived it unanswered. In early spring, I stopped by the bookstore on a trip home. Elias was at the counter, older by another season, and still impossible to surprise. "Well?" he asked. "I think my life changed." "No," he said. "Your life obeyed. You changed first." Then he handed me a blank index card and a pencil. "Write the sentence." "What sentence?" "The one average people avoid because it ends the argument with themselves." I thought for a while and wrote 5 words. "I am no longer available." Elias read it, nodded, and slid the card back to me. "Good," he said. "Now keep proving it." I thought the story ended there. It did not even close. Because the final prison is not outside you. It is the part that whispers you can relax now, that you have changed enough, that power can become personality without staying disciplined every single day. And that voice almost cost me everything. Success tempts you to become visible too early. That is how the slide begins. Not with failure, with relief. By summer, the pilot I built was being rolled out company-wide. Simone got promoted. I got her old title, a better salary, and a calendar crowded by people who had never noticed me before. Invitations appeared. Panels. Just wanted to connect messages from men who only respected momentum after it became measurable. At first, I answered too many messages, stayed in rooms longer, explained the system to people who had not earned the blueprint. It felt deserved. That is the seduction. Visibility makes you feel established right before it makes you exposed. Lena noticed first. Walking home after dinner, she said, "You've started performing success." I laughed because I wanted her wrong. That sounds like something Elias would say. Maybe because he'd be right, I almost argued. Then I heard my own voice from a networking event earlier that night, turning hard lessons into polished anecdotes for strangers. She was right. I had begun leaking again, not from insecurity, but from pride. The old self was clever. If weakness failed, it returned through vanity. The correction came fast. A consulting firm hired by our parent company requested a strategy review and asked me to join a planning session. One partner, Nathan Cole, spent the first 20 minutes flattering me with professional precision. He said he had heard I was one of the rare operators who sees both system and people. Then he casually asked where our model might still be vulnerable 6 months from now. Beautiful trap. It sounded like respect. I nearly gave him everything. Instead, the pause returned. In that silence, I could see the structure. This was extraction. So I smiled and said, "I'm always considering vulnerabilities. That's why I don't discuss unfinished ones." His expression barely shifted, but enough. Predators dislike closed doors more than locked ones. For the rest of the session, he stayed warm and gave me nothing. That night I called Elias. I liked the attention, I said. Of course you did, he said. That never goes away. Discipline just learns to spot it sooner. So this is permanent? The temptation is. The structure must be too. That was the real ending of Average, refusing to drift back when life got easier. 2 weeks later, I got the chance to prove whether I had really learned it. Our chief operating officer invited me to present the next phase of the system to the executive committee in New York. Bigger room, higher stakes. The night before my flight, my mother called. My uncle had been diagnosed with heart failure. Family would gather in Columbus that weekend. You should come, she said. They'll notice. If you don't. If I flew to New York, family would call me cold. If I skipped the presentation, I would hand a strategic room to people less prepared. For an hour, I paced, while every old role tried to reclaim me. Lena watched until I stopped moving. What serves you now? She asked. I laughed once. You and Elias are becoming dangerous together. Answer it. So I did. I called my uncle directly, not my mother. I told him I loved him, that I would come the following week and spend real time with him, and that tomorrow I had a responsibility I was not willing to abandon performatively. He was quiet for a second, then said, Good. I'm sick, not dead. Go do your work. One direct conversation dissolved what 10 emotional ones would have complicated. Systems again. Go to source. The presentation in New York was the cleanest of my life. No overspeaking, no chase for approval. The committee asked hard questions. I answered what mattered and left empty space where performance usually lives. When I finished, the chief operating officer said, You're difficult to read. A year earlier, I would have panicked. This time I said, That helps me think. He smiled. It also helps you lead. The real proof was quieter than promotions. It showed up in ordinary moments, in how quickly I answered messages, in what I said no to without a paragraph. The outer life changed, yes, but the deeper victory was this. People stopped moving me with the same old buttons because the buttons no longer reached anything automatic. My father eventually wrote again. Longer email. Still careful. Still incomplete. I replied with one sentence. When consistency exists, trust follows. Until then, keep your promises small. He accepted that. That was enough. My mother still calls me distant sometimes. Brent still sends warm messages when he wants something. None of it hooks me the same way anymore. Not because I became heartless, I became harder to script. Months later, I returned to the rest stop west of Columbus, where I had first ignored 23 notifications and felt my old life crack. Same fields, same grey sky, different man. I sat in the car and thought about Elias's sentence. Most men only reach for Machiavelli when politeness stops working. He was right. What I had to live long enough to understand was this. Average is not a salary, a zip code, or a title. Average is any life built on obedience to the version of you other people find convenient. That is the version that had to die. Not the kind part. Not the loving part. The explainable part. The instantly reactive part. The approval-hungry part. The part that leaked plans, accepted roles, chased understanding, mistook visibility for progress, and called predictability who I am. That life did end. Not because of one book. It ended because I stopped feeding it. If this story hit harder than you expected, ask yourself one clean question. Which version of you is still making your life easy for other people to control? Find it, then starve it. Because average never leaves on its own. It waits for your permission. Power begins the day you refuse it.